Yo, what is going on, everybody? Thank you for clicking on this video. Today, we're going to be getting into Week 10 fantasy football rankings for the wide receivers. I just released my running back video, so if you didn't see that, make sure to go check that out. Also, drop a like on this video. It helps out a ton. Drop a comment if you got any questions, and make sure to subscribe to this channel. We got content coming all year. All right, so Week 10 wide receivers. First, we got to go over who's on bye. We got the Bengals, we got the Ravens, we got the Jets, and we got the Patriots. So that means no T. Higgins, no Jacoby Myers, no Tyler Boyd, no Devin Duvernay, and no Garrett Wilson. So those guys won't be mentioned here. There's also a couple of injury situations that we're going to have to monitor throughout the week. We got Josh Allen with his arm. I think Mike Evans fine. We got to see if there's anything up with him. And then we also obviously got to see what's going on with Keenan Allen as the week goes on. All right, with that out of the way, we can actually get into the rankings. All right, so first up, we're going to have Cooper Kupp going up against the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, the matchup for these top guys really doesn't matter. Regardless, you're going to have all these guys in your lineup no matter what. The rankings can vary from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, but regardless, you're going to have all these guys in your lineup as the top elite options no matter what. After him, I'm going to have Tyreek Hill going up against Cleveland. After him, we're going to have Stephon Diggs, who's going up against the Minnesota Vikings, so revenge game for him. But this is another thing we got to monitor with Josh Allen's arm, because if he doesn't play or if he's not fully healthy, then we're going to have to lower him. Regardless, Diggs is going to be in your lineup no matter what, but he would definitely be lowered if Josh Allen doesn't play. And the last guy in this top tier is going to be Justin Jefferson on the other side of the ball, going up against Buffalo Bills. Tough matchup, but still, he's Justin Jefferson. He's matchup proof. Going to be your lineup, like I said, with all these guys no matter what. Now that we got those four guys out of the way, the top options, we can go on to the next tier. On our wide receiver 5, we are going to have DeAndre Hopkins going up against the LA Rams. Over the past 4 weeks, they've been the 4th hardest matchup for wide receivers, but DeAndre Hopkins has already shown that he's still the same guy. He's pretty much matchup proof, but I do think that he should be the start of this tier 2 instead of tier 1, just given the matchup. After him, we're going to have a guy that absolutely balled out last week. We're going to have Devontae Adams. Similar situation with Hopkins. He has a really tough matchup this week against Indianapolis Colts, but somebody who you're going to be starting no matter what. He saw 17 targets last week, which is absolutely insane. He honestly could have had a way better week. He scored all of his fantasy points in the first half, but regardless, he's still going to be an absolute stud for you. He scored 31.6 half PPR fantasy points last week. So lowered a little bit on tier 1 because of the matchup, but still going to be a top 6 option this week. After him, we're going to have Jalen Waddle on the other side of Tyreek Hill. He's the wide receiver 4 on the year. This offense is just unbelievable. And going up against Cleveland Browns, nothing to be worried about. So he's going to keep being like a top 8 wide receiver no matter what. Probably rest of the season, definitely top 10. So I got him ranked here, my wide receiver 7 this week. And the last guy that I'm going to have in this tier is going to be AJ Brown going up against the Washington Commanders, who started out as one of the easiest matchup for wide receivers. They've definitely gotten a lot better over the past 4 weeks. Still not one of the hardest defenses to go against, but definitely on the harder side of it. But AJ Brown, another guy who's just too big, too physical. This offense is too good. Going to be able to score many touchdowns any single week. So given the upside, he's going to be your lineup as an elite option, but he definitely can have down weeks, which hold him back from being higher than this, because he definitely has talent for it. All right, moving on to the next tier, my wide receiver 9, I'm going to have CeeDee Lamb. They're going up against Green Bay, which has been the 10th hardest matchup for wide receivers over the past 4 weeks. But I think that this offense with Dak back, what we saw from the last week that they played before the bye, they're just one of those great offenses, and I think that Lamb's going to be matchup proof pretty much going forward. We haven't seen it though over an extended period of time, and this is a tough matchup, so it's going to hold him off from being in the higher tier, but I still think that he's going to be a good option for you this week and going to be in your lineup pretty much no matter what. I know that I say that a lot, but it's just kind of weird going through these top 10 guys, because you're starting all of these guys no matter what. People can sometimes get mad at, oh, you have this guy at 5 and this guy at 8. It's like, does it really matter? Like, you're starting all of these guys no matter what. So don't worry about these top like 10 to 12 guys that are going to be in your lineup pretty much regardless. The real questions come in after that. Next up, in my wide receiver 10, I'm going to have Chris Olave going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which schedule adjusted has been the easiest matchup for wide receivers. And he's had quote unquote down weeks the past 2 weeks, but still had 7 targets 2 weeks ago and 9 targets last week. And so as a rookie and not a great offense, when your floor is 7 to 10 fantasy points, I mean, that's pretty damn good. I think this is a matchup that he'll be able to kind of dominate and take over. Michael Thomas out for the rest of the season just opens up even more opportunity for him. So I think that he's going to be blow-in wide receiver 1 for the rest of the season. And this is a matchup where he can absolutely dominate. So hopefully we're going to see him get in the end zone this week. But regardless, I think that he's going to be great for fantasy, so put him in your lineup. I got him here, my wide receiver 10. Up next, we're going to have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, honestly, he hasn't quite been the same since the first 2 weeks. I know he got hurt in week 3 and he was doing pretty good there, but since then, really just hasn't shown quite the same. But past 2 weeks has had 10 targets and 9 targets, and they're going up against Chicago Bears, which really good matchup for wide receivers, so he should be able to produce again this week. But he's had 2 weeks now where he's fully healthy, so if he struggles again this week, then we're definitely going to have to lower him from what we originally thought at the start of this year. The offense overall is definitely taking a step back, so that could be part of it, but also it kind of seemed like it could have taken a step back because he wasn't there and Swift wasn't there. Now they're both back, and I mean, Swift isn't fully healthy, but they're both back, so if he struggles this week, we'll have to lower him some, but regardless, I think that he's going to be a solid option for everyone. And the last guy that I'm going to have in this tier is going to be Mike Evans. Now, over the past 4 weeks, Seattle's actually been pretty tough against wide receivers. They're the 8th hardest matchup, but Mike Evans should be fine no matter what. Past 3 weeks, 15 targets, 11 targets, and 11 targets. Hasn't had any massive blow up games, but been pretty solid every week besides last week. We're still hoping the offense can figure it out, but it's really hard to kind of see that. They've struggled against some easy matchups, but Mike Evans is still Mike Evans. He's dropped a couple passes, and if those get figured out, then he could be even better than he has been. So although it might not feel like he's been that good, he's still been pretty solid, so have him in your lineup. Don't be too worried about it. If you think somebody's really worried about him, then you can go trade for him. I think that's a good option. He should be solid. Now on to the next tier, my wide receiver 13, we're going to have DK Metcalf. I mean, Geno, it's been 9 weeks now. He's just doing the thing. This is just what we should expect from him, and DK's been pretty solid so far this year. Obviously, we'll have a couple down weeks here and there, but most weeks he's been good. Past 2 weeks, he definitely has been. And they're playing Tampa this week, which sounds like a tough matchup, but it's really not, so not too worried about it. He should be just fine this week. So I got him here, my wide receiver 13. After DK, I'm going to have Deebo Samuel, my wide receiver 14, who's coming off a bye and an injury. He practiced on Monday, so it sounds like he's pretty much healthy and good to go, but still a situation that we're going to have to monitor as the week goes on. Up against LA Chargers was actually a pretty tough matchup for wide receivers, but there's just so many weapons in this offense. It's really hard to focus on one of them, that he always has the opportunity to be great, but because there's so many weapons, it's hard for him to kind of do what he did last year where he was one of the only real options producing. But Deebo's a guy that can break a massive play with just one touch, so still going to be a good option for everybody, but definitely got to have to temper expectations from what we originally thought in the beginning of the year. Now, after Deebo, we're going to have Tyler Lockett, who has also been really good this year. Caught touchdowns in both the past 2 weeks. Like with DK going up against Tampa Bay, Geno's been solid. These guys are both his main targets. Seen 8 or more targets in over half the game, so I think Tyler Lockett's going to keep on being a solid wide receiver too for everybody, so keep playing him. After him, I'm going to have Amari Cooper, who is going up against the Miami Dolphins. They have been a pretty easy matchup for wide receivers this year, and Amari quietly has been one of the best wide receivers in fantasy. He was a wide receiver 8 before the bye week. Now, obviously, I don't predict that to continue, but I do think that he's going to keep being a wide receiver 2 for everybody, and definitely has some great upside. He's almost like a boomer bust player, which is just kind of weird given this offense, but he's going to either score you a touchdown and be great for you, or he's not, and it's not going to be good, but he's done that a bunch this year, so I think you got to keep taking that risk and putting him in your lineup. And the last guy that's going to be in this tier, my wide receiver 17, is going to be Chris Godwin. He's definitely been a little bit disappointing, but listen to these targets: 12 targets, 13 targets, 11 targets, 10 targets. That's the past 4 weeks. It's been great in the target side, just hasn't fully turned into fantasy production, but I think anyone with that volume and somebody that is talented as Chris Godwin, he is also still coming off of injury, although he's played every single game since week 4. I wouldn't be surprised if he's still getting acclimated, and this offense, I mean, hasn't looked good, so if they can turn it around, which I don't know if they're going to, but if they can, he'll be a lot better. But regardless of that target volume and who Chris Godwin is, he's going to be a mid-low wide receiver 2, so I got him here, my wide receiver 17. Now, moving on to my wide receiver 18, I'm going to have Alan Lazard, who even probably has a conversation to be ranked higher than this, but I got him here for right now. Everyone on this team is hurt, so he's going to be one of the only options, although this is a pretty tough matchup against Dallas this week. He had 10 targets last week, only turned into 4 receptions, but 87 yards and a touchdown. And he's gone for over double-digit fantasy points in 5 of the 7 games that he's played. And with Romeo Doubs out now, he's just going to get even more targets. So I think that he's going to be solid, even with a tough matchup. I definitely thought about putting him into this upper tier, but just given the matchup and just how the offense has looked for the Packers, I put him down here, but I still think he's going to be good this week. Now, after him, I'm going to have Juju, my wide receiver 19. Over the past 3 weeks, he's been fantastic. Over those last 3 weeks, weeks he's played, which is week 6, 7, and 9, because they had a week 8 bye, he's the wide receiver 6. Now, obviously, I don't think he's going to keep doing that, but that just shows the upside that he has, and now that he's really getting acclimated into this offense, he really seems to be an integral part of it. Saw 12 targets last week, which is by far the most he's seen over the year. And against Jacksonville, there's no reason for that to really stop, so I'm feeling pretty good about playing Juju if I got him. After him, at my wide receiver 20, I'm going to have Joshua Palmer. Now, this is obviously contingent on Keenan Allen not playing. Mike Williams definitely isn't going to play, and I don't suspect that Keenan Allen's going to play, just given what we've seen. I'm not going to predict him to be playing until he says that he's going to. I mean, we've been playing this game since week 1 now, and we're in week 10, so there's no reason to really believe it until we see it. Josh Palmer is also really good the past 2 weeks that he's played. He was hurt week 7, and they had a week 8 bye, but in week 6, he had 12 targets for 9 receptions, only 57 yards, but still 12 targets. And this past week, he saw 10 targets turn into 8 receptions for 106 yards. And they're also playing San Francisco this week, which does sound like a pretty tough matchup, but over the past 4 weeks, they're actually giving up the 3rd most points to fantasy wide receivers, so I'm not actually that worried about it. And Justin Herbert needs to throw the ball to somebody, and Josh has definitely shown that he can be that guy, at least for the time being, while these 2 wide receivers are out. So as long as Keenan isn't playing, I'm going to have Joshua Palmer ranked here. And the last guy in this tier, my wide receiver 21, is going to be Christian Kirk. He's been up and down this year, but we saw him be good again last week. Saw 9 targets, 8 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown. Going up against Kansas City, pretty easy matchup. Also, that should be pretty high scoring, so they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. And Kirk is a clear main target here. It doesn't always turn into fantasy points for him, but it has a good amount this year, and he's going to have the opportunity for sure. So I got him ranked here low end wide receiver 2. I think that's where he probably will be the rest of the year. Not somebody that I'm going to rely on to produce every single week, but definitely has the opportunity to be a really good piece in your lineup. Moving on to the next tier, I'm going to start it off with Brandon Ayuk, who was going up against the LA Chargers. Over the past 3 weeks that he's played, he's also been very good. In that time, he's actually the wide receiver 3 over week 6, 7, and 8. Obviously didn't play week 9 because they had a bye, but in those 3 weeks, he's the wide receiver 3, which is fantastic. Obviously, we're not predicting that to continue to happen, but it just shows, again, like the upside he has, similar to what we talked about with Juju. Debo is coming back, though, so it's definitely going to take away some targets, but this offense is just unbelievable now with Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle figuring it out, and both these wide receivers playing good. There's not going to be enough to go around every single week, but it's going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL, and Brandon Ayuk has been a very good part of that offense so far this year. So given the upside that he does have, you're probably going to be playing him, but there also definitely is a pretty low floor just given how many options there are in this offense, and he could just not see the ball too much one week. After him, we're going to have Michael Pittman Jr., who had a pretty tough week last week. I mean, the whole entire offense, it was one of the worst showings I've ever seen. It was terrible. It'll be interesting to see what happens this week because they just fired their coach Frank Wright and hired Jeff Saturday, who's never coached before. They got a 30-year-old play caller who's never called plays before. He was the assistant quarterback coach. So I don't know if they're going to be bringing in Matt Ryan or have Nick Foles play or continue to play Sam Ehlinger. Regardless, I don't really know. For fantasy's sake, honestly, I want Matt Ryan back, especially for Michael Pittman. Sam Ehlinger obviously is not the answer here, and they're playing Las Vegas this week, which is a really, really nice matchup, really easy. So he should be able to be decent if he can just have some halfway decent targets. I don't know if that's going to happen, though. We got to wait and kind of monitor the situation as the week goes on, see who's going to be playing, see what they want to do. But I could definitely see myself moving him lower as we get more news if Sam is going to be starting or not and what they want to do with the offense. But we're just going to have to monitor that. After him, we're going to have DJ Moore. He was back to a down week last week, but hopefully he'll be able to pick it up this week against Atlanta. We've seen him be pretty solid since they fired their coach and PJ's been starting. Sounds like PJ will be starting again this week, and they just played Atlanta and he went for 6 receptions, 152 yards and a touchdown. Now, given the touchdown and a lot of the yardage came on one big play, he was still doing really good in that game. We will see what will happen. I'm not exactly sure what they want to do, if they'll bring in Baker somewhere through the game or whatnot, but I think that DJ Moore, since the firing, has been a lot better, and hopefully he'll be able to pick it up again this week. After him, I'm going to have Terry McLaurin going up against Philadelphia. Pretty tough matchup. They did play them earlier in the year, though, and he was really good. Had 9 targets for 6 receptions and 102 yards. That was with Carson Wentz, though, so we'll see what happens. Still had a pretty decent week. I mean, not terrible, not great. Still had 9 targets last week, so I think he's pretty locked in for that 8 to 9 targets. Just if he can, turn that into actual fantasy production, we will have to see every single week. But I think Terry McLaurin will stay pretty much right around here for the rest of the year, and it could just vary depending matchup to matchup. But I don't think he has much higher upside, but I do think he has a pretty safe floor. And the last guy that I'm I'm going to have in this tier is going to be Gabe Davis. Going up against the Minnesota Vikings, actually one of the easiest matchups for wide receivers this year. Over the past 4 weeks, they've given up the second most points to wide receivers. He was at the top of this tier for me originally, but I've moved him down since the Josh Allen injury. If he does play but is hurt from the elbow, then I think the deep ball is really what will be affected the most by him, and that's where Gabe Davis kind of thrives. So if he's taken out from the deep ball, then it could be really hard for Gabe Davis to produce. So I've definitely lowered him a bit this week. We'll have to get more news on Josh Allen to actually see what's going on. But for right now, I got him ranked right here, my wide receiver 26. After him, I'm going to have Devonta Smith at my wide receiver 27. Hasn't been very good the past 2 weeks, but pretty nice matchup against the Washington Commanders this week. He's somebody who I've talked about is kind of boomer bust, just given that AJ Brown, clear wide receiver 1. It's not a really large volume throwing offense, although it is a very high powered offense. So there's going to be scoring opportunity every single week. And Devonta Smith is very good. So he's going to be able to produce any single week, but we can't predict him to do it all the time. So it kind of just ends up being, if you want to take that risk, who else you have to go against him, but definitely has high upside every single week, but going to have a pretty low floor. After him, I'm going to have Jerry Jeudy. He's honestly kind of shown himself to be the clear wide receiver 1 and has been very productive the past 2 weeks. They did have a bye last week, but the 2 weeks before that, he was very productive. And one of those was against the New York Jets, who we've now seen as a very good defense. So I think for the time being, we got to just keep ranking Jerry Jeudy as the wide receiver 1 here, because I think that he kind of is. In the games that they've played together, and he's played the full amount of snaps, which is basically all the weeks besides week 2 and 3, he's actually been a lot better than Courtland Sutton. So until further notice, Jerry Jeudy is a wide receiver 1 in Denver, although that isn't very valuable just given that we've seen Russell Wilson be who he is now. After Jerry, I'm going to have Deontay Johnson. He also has not been very productive at all this year, but he's going to have even more target volume with Chase Claypool gone. And he's still getting 9 to 10 targets almost every single week. Eventually, that's going to turn into some production. And up against the New Orleans Saints this week, I think it's another good opportunity. They have not been very good against pretty much anywhere this year. And without Chase Claypool and coming off a bye, hopefully they're going to have some plays drawn up and just more target volume to go around for him and George Pickens. And the last guy I'm going to have, I'm a wide receiver 30, is going to be Rondell Moore. Last 2 weeks, he's been very productive. 2 weeks ago, saw 8 targets for 7 receptions, turned into 92 yards and a touchdown. This past week, saw 10 targets for 8 receptions and 69 yards. Very encouraging to see. It seems like they're finally using him in the right way, putting him in the slot and letting him kind of create after the catch. It seems like they're just going to continue to use him as such. So pretty exciting. Going up against LA Rams, though, pretty tough matchup for wide receivers. So tempering expectations a little bit on him, but definitely somebody I'm excited about to have on my team. And if I need to flex him this week, put him into my lineup. Now, there's still a lot of guys outside of this top 30 who are definitely fantasy viable and could really be in contention with any of these guys in this last tier. Some of those guys are, George Pickens. We got Courtland Sutton, Curtis Samuel, Adam Thielen, Darnell Mooney, Brandon Cooks. I think all of those guys are kind of right outside in their own tier that any of them could really be switched in for any of these guys. So if you have any specific questions about them, let me know. This last tier is always really hard to decide on and who to leave out because they're all so close. It's really tough. So if you have specific questions, let me know about them. Leave them in the comments down below. Make sure you leave who else is on your team, half PPR, standard scoring. You can also help to know if you're favored, you think you should win, then you might not need as much upside. All those little details help out a lot and when you have start-sit decisions. So leave them down in the comments if you got them. Like I also said, go see my running back video if you haven't seen that. The quarterback and tight end ranking should be coming out after this. So stay tuned for those and I'll see y'all there. Later.